when you think about the everything from the process to the product, the journey to the destination that a PhD takes you through, can you talk about how does that change you? How does that impact your thinking, your communicating, your researching, just you as a person? Because I know you walked away with more than, I say, just one book, as if it wasn't a big deal. Like, obviously you walked away with a book that you published, but there's more than just that you walked away with. Can you speak to that part?
Yeah. It's my wife and I talk about this a lot. When you have a PhD, it changes everything, because suddenly you're thinking critically at levels that you weren't thinking at before you did it. And that's what I've told students who want to go on and do a PhD, that this is what you get when you come out of it. You have levels of ability to think that were unattainable prior to doing the PhD. I'll go even a bit more specific with regard to the Hebrew Bible, right? With regard to biblical interpretation, because this is what my PhD is in. It's the reason why I ever went this direction was after doing theology, you realize, okay, well, all these theologians are just reading the Bible. So why wouldn't we all just become biblical scholars then, so that we can actually interpret the text correctly, right? Or you're reading Jesus and the apostles, you're reading the New Testament, and you're thinking, okay, they're just thinking on the Hebrew Bible, but I don't know anything about the ancient Near East or the Hebrew Bible, so I've got to go back even further to figure out what's going on here. And so I think for the PhD, what it does is, for reading the text, is it provides a level of ability to sift quickly through all of the various points behind the text. You got the text, you got the history, the culture, the religious traditions that might be impacting the ideas that are coming through. It gives you that ability to sift through all of that quickly, and moreover, to know where to find it. And I think that is I love that as a professor and a teacher here at ORU. I love it when my students I'm teaching a seminar in theological research for the undergraduate students. And so I have them in the library a lot right now, just sitting down. They just have to write an 8 to 12 page paper, but I want them to sit down, be near the books, and I want them to begin to learn. You need to go find this information, because once you have that tool, and a lot of these students want to go into ministry, but it's no different in ministry. You've still got to know how to find the information, how to be able to sift through it. So I want them to have that. And I just love it when the light bulbs sort of come on and like, okay, this is how you do this. You have to go to the shelves. You've got to find these books. You got to find these commentaries, these journal articles. And this will help me to understand the text, which is really important for what I'm going to do with the rest of my life, to understand the text rightly and better. So as I've said to other students, as I know I've said it to you, the PhD is an arduous journey. You're not going to come out on the other side necessarily making a lot of money. You may not even get a job in the field, as I know we may talk about a little bit later, but you do come out with the ability to read the text better than when you came in. Or whatever discipline you're in, that's going to be true for whatever practical elements that may work out. So
that's really good. You know, I saw a thread of someone who likes to make complex ideas simple through images on Facebook. And I think I sent this to you a number of months ago. And it was a beautiful picture, a series of pictures of someone who was mining and mining in the ground for resources. And he talked about how culturally he feels like in the culture that he's a part of, there's a huge value that's put on broad, shallow content, which, again, there's a place for that.
Yeah.
But he feels like because of the different social media platforms that have taken deep root in society recently, we have valued less and less deep research. And he does a great job talking about the journey and the difficulty that this takes, because the deeper you go, the fewer guides you have, the less familiarity, because you're going to places that not many people go to.
Yeah.
But and it takes longer. The ground gets harder the farther you dig down into the ground. Even if it rained recently, there's a point where you dig so deep that doesn't matter if the ground's been soaking for a week. There's no moisture down there, and you're working hard. You're going deep, but that's often where you find, by the way, I know, it's where you find the treasure.
Oh yeah, totally.
So I think it's great.
Yeah.
And we talk about this a lot because I don't have a PhD yet. And, we talk about this, if this is a journey I want to take on or not.
Mm-hmm.
Real quickly, though, I do want to hit on, I know this episode's about PhD, but I want to attest that what you're doing for your students in seminar and theological research, I know I experienced that in my master's degree. Before I had a communication undergraduate degree, and I was a pastor at a church. I was a kids pastor at a large church and writing curriculum for kids churches. And I can tell you that I loved the team I was on. We did phenomenal work. Absolutely loved it. I will also say, though, there are resources I did not know existed until I actually got a degree in biblical studies, a master's degree there. And like you said, even if some of your students, they're not going to go on to academia, there are resources that they're simply not popular in church realms. And and I think that I'll just say this as a former curriculum writer and a former kids pastor, I think there are certain resources I wish I knew about that I think would have helped us to be even more holistic in the way that we teach. Yeah. So, and how do we learn those things? It's you always learn from someone who's a little bit beyond you, right? Yeah. If you've only taken algebra, you probably can't teach algebra. But once you've gone on a couple classes beyond algebra, right, then that's when you can really teach it. So that's why it matters that we have people who keep pursuing the PhD level. They're going to go the farthest lengths that are possible. And at some point, they're also going to bring back knowledge for the rest of us.
Yeah, exactly. Well said. I mean, I think that you're absolutely right about that. And especially for my ministry students, I really try to emphasize, I want them to know this really matters. Like, you are going to be out there telling people ideas regarding the text and regarding theology, and it matters for their lives, and it matters for the sheep that are under them. And I'll tell you, I've sit in many sermons, and I sit there with the knowledge, and I think, okay, that's just not good way to go the direction you're going with that. And never judgmental, and it's been years of that journey. I mean, since Hebrew University. And then of course for myself, I mean, I've been in a conversation with a dear friend of mine that I've had for a long time. And then another conversation with a dear friend of mine from Aberdeen who did a PhD in New Testament studies regarding one verse, John 10:35. And that conversation has had me on a little research journey just for the last 2.5 weeks, but I found some things where I'm like, okay, hey, never read this text in this light, and this suddenly changes some things for me. So this is the point, that it never ends, the research. So if you're going to go into ministry, or if you're going to be involved with teaching the biblical text, you've got to have the training and the degrees. And one thing I didn't say with the supervisory role, and this is important, I think I kind of talked about it, with submitting or not submitting. This is the difference between those out there in ministry who've never done degrees at these levels or never done degrees in general, is you still have to learn the ability to submit to those who are over you in the stewarding of your ideas. Whether those over you are right or wrong, you've got to learn as the one who is stewarding knowledge to learn that submission. Because it helps you as you're moving forward then on your own in research to say, okay, what sort of pushback am I going to get by saying what I'm about to say in writing? You've got to be able to step back and see arguments that are going to come back at you, and you've then got to determine whether you're going to submit or not submit to those potential arguments that may come toward you. So that becomes very important in the PhD supervisory role, and it can make or break a student actually. So
that is a great point. I'm so glad you made that. I relate to that on a leadership level, where I was very grateful to have worked at a church that had phenomenal leadership, and they talked about the same thing you're saying. Yeah. And within the more intellectual realm, I think we all have known someone at some point who is an intellectual rogue vigilante, and they, I think, teeter on arrogance because they feel like they're the ones who have the secret code, the secret knowledge, because they're so smart and they've read so much, but they don't let anyone else influence them. Right. And they are highly sensitive to any criticism of their ideas. They may even lash out. And this can often be the product of someone who's never gone through the process of submission, as you say, and being able to be led by someone. This is why I think many people get advice, even if you think you want to leave, even as a young person, I want to start my business right away. I want to start a church right away. I just want to go and influence everybody right away. Not saying it's wrong. I'm not trying to say it's wrong to do that, but there's a reason why there's an old adage of wisdom that before you lead your own thing, serve someone else.
Right.
And I hear what you're saying is intellectually, we have that same thing.
That's right.
And even though technology now lets you, it doesn't matter what your background is, if you're a good enough communicator and you have good enough ideas, you can get in front of a phone and you can communicate information.
That's
and
right.
I'm not saying this is bad, by the way. I mean, we're doing this.
Right.
But
as part of our calling, right? Yeah.
As part of our calling.
So. Right.
And just, so yeah, I would second and just say, hey, to people out there who, you know, especially those who are in ministry or those teaching, following your calling, don't listen to that voice of pride that feels like you have to have all the information yourself.
Yeah.
And there are people who want to help. And on the academic side, it's the same thing.